We're here on Building the Groundwork podcast. We have Melissa Petersmann today, also known as the Diesel Queen. Looking forward to learning about her path in the industry. Welcome, Melissa. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Yes.
It's been a while.
Yeah, you are have a ton of followers in the industry. You've built up, I don't know, it's like over 500,000. So, which is extremely impressive. And it's something that, you know, your accounts I follow as well, with our company being involved in the service end of the industry. So I'd love to know kind of your career path, like how you got interested in pursuing the profession and just, how you navigated things.
Well, I grew up in Wyoming, in Colorado, northern Colorado, southern Wyoming, and my dad's been a logger his entire life. So I grew up in the woods. I grew up around logging equipment. He had a diesel truck that I thought was going to be mine one day. And I didn't really get into the like wanting to work on things until I was like 16, and I started hanging out with the local Wyotech kids in Wyoming, and that's the trade school there.
Mm-hmm.
And I started dating someone from that trade school, and I started helping them work on things. And then I started working on my own stuff a little bit, and I'm like, man, this is something I actually really love. So after fighting with my mom for a couple months about it, I finally landed on just going to Wyotech and not going to any other college, just Wyotech. And I went for semis originally. I majored in advanced diesel and motorsports and chassis fabrication was my secondary thing. And then I worked, I was hired for international before I even left Wyotech, before I even graduated. And I worked there for about 4 months. And that was a decent experience, but they started getting really slow. So I was the new kid and there was another new kid, and our hours were cut really bad, and I couldn't afford to continue working there. So the only place that would hire me in the entire Denver area, like northern Denver area, which is where I was at the time, that wasn't night shift, was John Deere.
Oh, nice.
So I just went for it and started working at John Deere, and I never looked back. I've worked for a John Deere dealership ever since.
Did it come like pretty natural to you? Like, were you talented in the beginning? Like you said that you loved doing it. Did it come pretty easy?
Oh no, I learned everything the hard way. No, I learned everything the hard way. I would never say I'm not going to sit here and say I think I'm gifted by any means. I would say I'm average mechanic, but I've got my specialties here and there that I like, things that I like to do or things that I'm good at, but I don't think I was ever like above and beyond gifted from anyone else. I think I just had a lot more motivation and a lot more drive than a lot of people entering the industry at the same time as me. And that's
was your dad supportive? You kind of mentioned that your mom maybe was.
Yeah, he was all about it. He thought it was cool. He's like, I remember when you were in, what was it, 7th grade? And after your very first welding class, you came home and told me you wanted to be a welder when you grew up. And I was so proud of you. Well, I didn't choose welding. I chose diesel mechanics. But yeah, he actually calls me for help on equipment occasionally. So yeah, he loves it. He thinks it's great. My mom is in total support of it now. She loves it. But when I first was thinking about it, she thought it was just a phase. And she thought that, like, she had the old school thinking that, oh, it's just a dirty mechanic job. You're not going to make any money. You're going to be broke. Right. It's not going to be worth it. And 4 years into 4 years into my career, I'm now making what she made or what she's making, right? I'm like, we're competitive on pay. Sure. And I've only been in the industry 4 years, and she's been in her industry with 8 college degrees for like 30. So then she kind of earned some respect for it, and she's happy about it, but it took a minute for her to be supportive of it. So
you had mentioned Wyotech. Dealing with a lot of technicians like we do, I see Wyotech a lot on resumes. Is that like a very popular trade school? Like, is it just seeing how many times I see it mentioned, it seems like people come from far away to attend that school. Is that true?
Well, Wyotech used to be a lot bigger than it is. I think Jim Mathis, he's the current owner. I know him sort of personally.
Mhm.
I think he's trying to regrow it, but initially, Wyotech was one of the biggest colleges for trade schools for mechanicking. They had an automotive campus, not just a
Mhm.
school, like in the school. They had an entire campus for automotive in 3 or 4 different states. They had a diesel campus in 2 states, and
Mhm.
they also used to have light duty diesel classes, not just the heavy duty. They also they have some motorsports and chassis fabrication, but they used to have an entire section of just race cars
Mhm.
and stuff like that. And they had a collision center. Now I don't know if they still do collision. Laramie is the only campus that I know of that's open, and they only have the one campus in Laramie now, not two. They used to have two.
Mhm.
Um, I think they're great. I loved it. Um, but it's like any college or anything you do, you get out of it what you put into it. If you
Sure.
go into it thinking I already know everything and I don't need any of this and this is stupid, then you're not going to learn anything. But if you approach it as like how I approached it, like I didn't know anything and I need to soak up as much information as possible, it's great.
How long is the program?
It's like the base program. So to graduate, you have to do the core classes and then you have to do one extracurricular class. And when I was going, that was a little under a year. And then I took two extracurricular classes. I took advanced diesel and then motorsports and chassis fabrication, which is basically welding and race cars and four-wheel drive stuff. Um, that was a year. Like I graduated almost the exact same day of the month that I
Mhm.
started the year prior. So
And then do they help with like placement? Like and I read a lot more now about how like OEMs are trying to like sponsor trade schools or like provide internships like Caterpillar, John Deere you mentioned like is that part do you see partnerships like that? Does that help with placement afterwards?
So Wyotech itself does have what they call career fairs. And what career fairs are is right around, they stagger their phases, obviously. There's like 2 or 3 different times a year that you can start
Mhm.
in Wyotech. You don't have to start it like they stagger them.
Mhm.
So about 2 or 3 times a year they have career fairs and they always stagger it about a month prior to one of their graduations and they'll have a career fair and they invite anybody and everybody who is interested in hiring a technician from Wyotech that
Mhm.
owns a shop or a dealership or is a company that needs technicians are welcome to come and set up their booths and they schedule interviews for everyone and the
Mhm.
companies that are coming on. Um, so they have like 1 or 2 free days of just people walking around getting to know each other. And then the third day of career fair was interviews. Like you and I interviewed with 2 or 3 different companies. Actually, one of the
Mhm.
companies I originally interviewed with was like what were they called? Barrett Gold or something like that in Nevada. And they actually took us out to me and a couple of other technicians out to the most expensive restaurant in Laramie, Wyoming for our interviews. So that was kind of cool. That was in Nevada though. I wasn't moving to I decided against moving to Nevada, but I think they do a pretty good job. And if for the most part, if you leave Wyotech without a job, that's your own fault.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's no doubt that the industry is short on talent for mechanics and technicians. So yeah, there's plenty of companies that could hire that role today.
Oh yeah, there's like one technician for every 1,000 positions that are open or something like that. It's crazy.
I'm sure you've been asked this a million times, but I just have to. Um, what was your experience like being a female, like pursuing? I'm sure. What is it? I would imagine maybe less than 5% of technicians are female, something like that. You might know, but like, did you ever feel like were people eager to help you? Did you feel like an outcast a little bit? Like, what was that experience like?
It was pretty normal, but you gotta. take into consideration, I had a slightly different experience when I moved to a different part of the country, but you got to take into consideration the area I lived in. Wyoming and Colorado, a lot of farmers, a lot of ranchers, a lot of tradespeople. Just
Mm-hmm.
that's just the nature of there. And so women being in doing manual labor jobs is not something that's as unheard of or as uncommon. I mean,
Sure.
every daughter helps her dad out at the ranch, right? Like that's just something that's normal.
Mm-hmm.
I never really had an issue with it as far as a negative thing.
Mm-hmm.
I did have a couple companies that wanted to like put my face on everything and put me in all the ads and like
Right.
use me for all their advertisements and stuff like that. But that like which was at the time I'm like, man, I don't want to be given special things just because I'm a girl, because that's going to
Sure.
create tension in the shop that the men don't get to go do things. And I do, and I had to put a stop to that. But for the most part, I've been treated pretty fairly, and
That's
I've had a
good.
great, very positive experience with it. So,
And so you left Biotech and then you found a job with a John Deere dealer?
well, I left Biotech and I was at International for 4 months,
Okay.
and then I went to John Deere, and then I worked at Hanan Equipment, which is no longer Hanan Equipment as of this year, which is sad. I
Right.
worked
I
at
saw
Hanan
that.
Equipment in Commerce City for almost 3 years, about 3 years. And then I decided I wanted to move back to Wyoming. So at the time, they didn't have a Hanan Equipment in Cheyenne. So I worked at Four Rivers. And I bounced back and forth between the Cheyenne shop and the Fort Collins shop just because the Cheyenne shop only did ag and the Fort Collins shop did ag
Mm-hmm.
and construction, which was where my specialty is construction.
Yeah.
So I helped them both out and worked for both of them. And then when Hanan built a shop in Cheyenne, I went back to Hanan.
Yeah. So you were a shop technician. Was there so you got to work on all the big stuff, big excavators, big loaders. Like is there certain type of jobs that you like to do more than others?
Excavators are my favorite machines. Um, I don't know why. I just have a fascination with them. I don't. I like doing hydraulic cylinders. I like doing engine work. I like doing axle work. I like doing big jobs.
Mm-hmm. That involve like a crane?
Yeah, yeah. I like, especially like I've done a lot of brakes and axles. I've torn lots of axles apart. That's fun to me. Obviously, that's not excavator, but that's like
Sure.
the loader axles and stuff. That's fun to me. Done a lot of backhoe transmissions. That's fun. Done some engines. I've only gotten to do one full rebuild of an engine professionally. I've done a bunch
Right.
on my own shit, but um, that was an 8230 tractor, 8000 series. So 8000 series tractor. I got to do a rebuild on that. Other than that, I did a lot of short blocks and long blocks and a couple single cylinder rebuilds.
Mm-hmm. What do you think it is? Like, is it
the
the complexity of the job and the time that it takes? Is that why you like doing it? 'Cause the sense of accomplishment, I'm sure, is
Well, it's like a
yeah,
big
we're not
puzzle,
yeah.
and I like that. And I like to be able to, I have a little bit of ADD. So if I'm given like a lot of small jobs, I have a hard time focusing because I'll just like bounce back and forth between them all the time. And
Mhm.
I will start 1,000 things and then it takes me forever to get something done. Where if I have one big job, I can sit
Mhm.
there and I can focus. And then usually how my bosses like to set me up, which is where I work best, is to have one big job and then have a couple little jobs trickle in for when I'm waiting on parts or
Okay.
waiting on DTAC or something like that. That's my favorite environment to work in because the big job helps keep me focused, or I have ADD and I will start 1,000 different things at once.
Is there a lot of oversight for shop technicians, or are you kind of on an island and like, hey, I'm doing this engine job. It's a 40-hour job, and they just trust me to do it?
It depends on the shop.
What
also
does a
depends on
high-performing
you.
shop do?
Again, depends on the shop because and the technicians, because it doesn't matter how high performance you are. If you're if you're a technician that messes things up all the time, they're going to helicopter you.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. They will helicopter you, which I stopped getting helicoptered right around the 2 or 3 year mark. Um, but the last shop I worked at, which was Hanan in Cheyenne, I was the only shop mechanic at all. I
Mhm.
was the only shop mechanic.
Oh
Oh
wow.
wow.
So by that time, though, I was 5 years in, 6 years in. So they just pretty much whatever. They let me do
Now,
whatever, and they didn't
When you
really bother
say
me too much.
when you say, hey, if you mess stuff up, is the only way to know if something's messed up that it gets back in the hands of the customer and a bigger problem ensues and then they come back to the dealer? Or is there, are those things caught before it gets back to the customer?
Well, hopefully, if any good shop has quality control, and it doesn't matter how good your mechanics think they are, it always helps to have an extra set of eyes on something.
Hmm.
And that's what I think is like the quality control, but not all shops use quality control. Sometimes if they're high output shops and they're putting out a lot of work and they're 2, 3 months behind already, um, they won't quality control as much.
Yeah, that doesn't work out well.
Yeah, which I've seen I've myself have had some embarrassing mishaps within the first couple of years I was working in the industry. I had a couple um, issues that made it to the customer,
Mm.
unfortunately. But for the most part, we had a pretty decent quality control at Hanan. And
Look, I mean, I think most people learn best by making mistakes, right? I mean, it's just natural. Yeah,
everybody fucks shit up at some point. It's whether or not you do it again.
sure. Yeah. What other thing that interests me, you had kind of alluded to it. So you work best like, hey, I'm on a big job, and then I have a couple smaller ones in case I'm like waiting on parts. How difficult is it? I would imagine it's really difficult that you're in a transition job or an engine job, which takes 40, 50 hours, and you have to stop because you have to wait for parts. How hard is it to go back to that job when they come in? Like, yeah, I would think that you're in a groove. Like, hey, all right, guys, do these next things, and then I'll be done. And it's like, oh, I gotta pause because I gotta wait 4 days a week for parts. Like, how hard is it to get back into that job and kind of pick up where you left off, or is it not an issue at all?
It depends on how familiar I am with the job. If it's something like rebuilding brakes and a diff lock and stuff in an axle, and I get it pulled out and I get it pulled apart, and then
Mm-hmm.
I'm waiting, which hopefully I did my job right and ordered my parts prior to that. But if
Mm-hmm.
for some reason I was waiting, I would be able to pick that up immediately because I've done enough of them.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's a job that I'm not as familiar with, it can be hard. And this is another thing that I don't like. Sometimes service advisors don't really understand either is every single time a mechanic has to sit down and stop what they're doing. It doesn't matter if it's for break, for lunch, because you called them to the office for the 10th time today. When they get back to the job, it takes at least 10 or 15 minutes for them to get their brain going and get back into doing what they were doing. So
Yeah.
if you call them to the office 10 times that day, right? That's a lot of time that they then have to come back on top of we get 2 breaks a day and a lunch, right?
Uh-huh.
That's a lot of time to get back into the groove of things. And I don't know. So I would assume like even for the most part, if I'm not super familiar with the job, it can take me a few minutes
Sure.
to get back into my groove, especially if it's something I'm not familiar with and I had to set it down for like a month.
Mm-hmm.
That can be kind of hard. So I got to go back through and look at everything I did and make sure I don't miss something. I have put things back together once, only happened once. I have put something back together before that was a major job, and I looked at the table and my workbench after I was done, and there was a part that was supposed to be inside the axle that was on the table. And I had to rip it all the way back apart. It was just the stupid little star washers,
Mm-hmm.
and they just hold there's like a big bolt that holds the planetaries in there, and that's all it does is hold the planetary in there. And I forgot it's just a washer to keep the bolt from rotating.
Mm-hmm.
and it was a greater axle. So they're not only inboard brakes, but they're inboard planetaries. So you have to when you're dropping the axle halves together into the center, you have to spline the brake pads or all the brake clutches and everything and the planetaries at the same time. It is the biggest pain in the ass thing I've ever done. And I had to take it all back apart because I didn't know which side that washer was for.
Hmm.
And that was because I had to set that job down for a minute and I completely forgot about the washer.
Sure.
So that was also like 5 years ago. But that was a little off topic.
No. So do you it seems like you really enjoy the shop. Like my experience with a lot of working at a dealer, most technicians it was like a race to get to a field truck. They wanted to be out in the field. Like I guess maybe there was like a degree of independence, and maybe doing different types of jobs every day. I don't know exactly what it was, but that's what it seemed like. It was everyone's most goals were, and I would imagine too, like you're not doing the big heavy stuff every day, because I'm sure that takes a toll on your body too.
I think that's it. I think that's why. Well, I think for some reason young kids are like, oh my God, I want to be a field mechanic. Like that's the next step in their career path. But I think for the most part, a lot of the older guys that enjoy doing the field work, it's a give and take. You're in the elements. It's harder for that reason, right? You don't necessarily have your peers to help you if you need
Right.
help, but you're not doing very big jobs. You're not going to be
Right.
rebuilding an engine in the dirt, right?
Right.
Like for the all you're gonna at most you're gonna be taking the engine out
Hmm.
and bringing it to the shop and doing it there, or having a shop
Yeah.
technician do it. So I personally I enjoyed my occasional field calls that I would do,
Hmm.
but I I never understood the especially in Wyoming and Colorado. Like the summertime was great, but I never
Sure.
understood wanting to be out there in negative 20-degree wind chill trying to ungel fuel filters on an
Yeah.
excavator and do that all morning for everyone. Like that doesn't it's not something that seems fun to me.
Yeah. I can imagine.
I
How
don't really get the thing about field technicians. Either that, like I've also seen some people like being field techs because they're not as analyzed by the boss. So if they do mess
Sure.
something up, but they can fix it and they can make like no one knows they messed it up, that's
Right.
better
Right.
for them.
Yeah. Makes sense. How did your partnership with Diesel Laptops come together?
Tyler had been trying to hire me for years before he hired me. What was it, 2 years ago now?
For what role?
He wanted me to help market and help push his laptops. And initially, I just wasn't ready to leave the industry. I just wasn't
Mhm.
ready. I love the industry too much, and he said he required, too much of my time for me to have that. And it's really, really hard to market. Like, there's a little bit of a gray area there with marketing laptops that are aftermarket while working for a dealership.
Sure.
Because obviously we know John Deere isn't going to use Diesel laptops. Are going to use Service Advisor.
Sure. Well, and you're only working on John Deere equipment at the dealer, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, some of the dealerships were like, bring us any when we're slow, we don't care. Bring us anything, we'll
Sure.
work on it. But um, then I moved to the east out here, and I worked my first summer here at another John Deere shop, and it was horrible. It's a horrible experience. Nothing wrong with the shop, but I didn't realize that in the east, when it says 80 degrees, it's actually 95 with the humidity, and it's horrible. It was I'm not made for that type of weather to be outside in
Yeah.
that all day long.
You wouldn't like Florida very much.
No, I've been to Florida a bunch. I have some family down there. The humidity levels where I'm living right now is kind of similar to
Oh,
Florida. It's nasty. It feels like you're walking into a swamp air. Like it feels like you're walking into dirty water. It's just coming from Wyoming. This just is gross. I
sure.
don't particularly enjoy it. So when Tyler called me up again and he's like, "Hey, like, I'll pay you what you're getting paid at the shop to come work for me, and we'll give you an engine to work on. We'll give you shit to work on. I'm like, all right, I'm down. Um, we haven't really gotten to get to the point of we were going to do an engine rebuild on an ISX, but we haven't really got the shop set up for that yet. His shop,
Hmm.
but yeah, so that's what I've been. He wanted someone that could speak the language of
Sure.
mechanicking and understand the product, understand how to use the product.
Right.
And I do use it. I use it on my own stuff all the time. I have
Sure.
a diesel laptop. That is the only laptop I still have is a diesel laptop that I use for my truck, and it's been very helpful. But he wanted, and I also have a really big platform, like you were mentioned, like the
Yeah.
500,000. That's just one platform. Facebook has 420. YouTube has almost 200. TikTok has like 900,000. So he wanted for us to work together and kind of help each other out.
Did you have a set strategy in the beginning when you started posting content online of you fixing things, or was it just more for fun? Like, what was your aim or your goal when you were doing it?
It was just for fun. I was just messing around with it. And Instagram, it took forever for me to build a following until they started doing reels. Um, I still had like 150,000 though, 200,000 before they started doing reels. But TikTok was I just exploded on TikTok. But I didn't really think anything was going to come of it. I didn't really think it was just for fun. It wasn't something I took that seriously.
Sure.
I've never actually taken social media itself that seriously until it became my main form of income. And now I'm like, shit, I got to watch what I say. I
Right.
got to
Right.
watch what I post. I got to be careful. But there's a lot of potential there. There's a lot of potential there. I don't just work for diesel laptops. I have a bunch of other sponsorships with a bunch of other companies that have made dreams like my engine build and my third gen truck come true. And that's something that
Sure.
there's no way I could afford that if I mean, I could have if I ate like spaghetti every night for like a year, but it's making it possible, like shit like that. It's cool. Like that's the benefit of it is, I don't really care how many followers I have or how many likes I get, but having the sponsorships and the connections with companies like Diesel Laptops and
Sure.
Industrial Injection and all these other companies I've worked for and with is that's what's makes it worth it, I guess.
Are you surprised at all by how many followers and people who pay attention and comment and stuff?
Yeah, I don't really I don't get it, I guess, even though it's me. I'm
Sure.
not like self-loathing or whatever, self-absorbed enough to be like everyone should follow me, of course. Like I don't really think that. I don't
What do you think? Do you have any thoughts of why you
It's
have
just
such a
because
big
I'm a
following?
mechanic and I'm a girl. I'm pretty sure that's the only reason. I don't think it really has that much to do. Like, if you look at the fucking Instagram models, there's a billion girls that are like over 10 hot on Instagram. There's a billion of them.
Sure.
There's also a fuckload of mechanics. I think the only thing that makes me different is I'm a girl and I'm a mechanic. I don't get it. I don't actually understand why it's that special, but it is apparently.
Do you ever get women who reach out to you and be like, "Hey, thank you. I've been following you. Like, and I have confidence to pursue this now because of you." Do you ever have that kind of reaction?
Occasionally, yeah. Unfortunately, for obvious reasons, most of my followers are men,
Yeah.
but I do occasionally get some women, and for the most part, I have got quite a few messages of like, "Oh my gosh, like now I want to be a mechanic or whatever." But the best ones are the messages I get from men that say that I'm an inspiration to their daughters.
Cool.
Those are the best ones.
That is very cool. I noticed that people love telling you that you're doing stuff wrong. I've noticed that.
And I can't help it. I have to say something back. Yeah. there's a lot of keyboard warriors, and I really need
Sure.
to like not respond, and I need to just ignore it. And I know they do it on purpose because that's the only way I'll respond to people is if I'm mad, and they know it, so they do it on purpose, and they shit talk. But sometimes I don't even have to. I don't even have to respond. I have my followers that then tell them they're wrong for me, which is pretty
Sure.
nice.
Sure.
But yeah,
It's just that's just the sad part of it. Like there's just so many people who they really don't have much to do, and so they just want to like talk down to other people. Yeah, do you get like motivated by haters or do you not care? I mean, it is natural to snipe back a little bit. Like I've done that myself because we get quite a bit. Yeah, when you're doing something different and you're new, people love to hate on it.
oh yeah, yeah. My Instagram and my TikTok, for the most part, I've been around long enough that I don't really get much hate comments. But
Hmm.
my freaking YouTube is savages. They are mean. They are freaking savages. They will cut your
What
throat out.
What's the meanest thing anyone said to you about on YouTube?
Oh, oh my God. Um, just a pinpoint one. I don't know.
There's not one that stands out like, oh, that like Jimmy Kimmel does mean tweets. Like that's his big like bit. Like he just reads like what the meanest tweets people say about him or some of his guests. Like what's the meanest thing someone has said about on YouTube about
For
you?
the most of the stuff I get on YouTube is like, you're way too clean. Your hair's too clean. Like there's no way. And then within the exact same like week, I get the exact same people commenting on a different post saying I'm too dirty and I intentionally got dirty and I'm doing it on purpose and I'm just doing it for the views. You know how many times I've been told I get dirty for the views, whatever the fuck that's supposed to mean. It's like
Yeah, I got news for people. The only reason why people put stuff on YouTube is for views.
that's
Yeah,
the whole
yeah.
point of social media. That's the whole point of it. I hope you know that.
It sounds like such a dumb thing to try to point out too. Like, so they're basically it's like their version of saying, "Hey, we didn't land on the moon." Like this is fake. You're not really working on something because you're not dirty.
Yeah, because I'm not dirty, and they're like, I don't believe you because you're too clean. And half the time, it's in some video that's not even about turning wrenches. Like I'm in a
Sure.
dress, right? And they're like, well, how come your hands are so clean? It's like, there's this cool thing called a shower. There's this really cool thing called a shower, and it works great if you use it. Like showering and shampoo goes a long way. Some of you guys should try it.
Question for you. Important question. What's your opinion on the industry labor shortage? You know, I started in 2004 at a dealer, and people were talking back in 2004. Hey, there's a serious problem. It's coming down the road. There's going to be a labor shortage for technicians. X percentage of our technicians are above the age of 55. People are going to be retiring. There's not enough people coming in. We're going to lose that knowledge. And so I'm sure like that was probably being said in like the mid to late 90s before I started. And there really hasn't been a lot of movement on it. What's your opinion on it and how do we solve it?
Well, obviously, it's definitely real. Um,
Hmm.
just the increase percentage of wages for mechanics is a direct, you know, response to trying to keep people in the industry. And our jobs are worth a lot more hourly than they've ever been because,
Hmm.
well, there's not enough people to fill it. But I don't know. I used to think that, going to college or going to high schools and talking to people and like all this stuff was the way to do it. But I think Tyler was right when he said, he believes that, everybody's on social media nowadays. And I think the best way to combat that is to have people that are in the industry doing well on social media.
Hmm.
Because unfortunately, and I've seen this a lot lately, is kids nowadays, they don't care about anything unless it's cool behind a phone screen. And I used to hate the idea of people just doing work on social media because it's cool or whatever, or the girls just doing it because they get follows for it, not actually enjoying it.
Mhm.
But I think that's the only way that we're going to ever solve that or get it better, at least in today's day and age, is to make
Mhm.
it cool. Make it something that's cool, make it something that's trendy. And I hate to be that way, and it's really unfortunate that that's what it's come down to, but kids need to know that you can make a lot of money doing this, and it's cool, and it's not frowned upon to do so. It's our whole society nowadays is centered around this little phone screen. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
unless we can get a way to push that onto people's phone screens to the younger generation, I don't know how we're actually going to fix it. I'm not sure
Yeah.
it is going to get better.
Well, look, I hear what you're saying. It is like I have kids, young kids, and it really bothers me how much they're on their phone, completely. But the positive though to the social media is that it's like educational for so many people. Like you are showing people what's possible. You're showing like what the real life, like, hey, this is behind the scenes of what a technician does every day. And so there is that positive aspect of it where you're telling the story.
The other part of that, though, is you have to, as a company owner or as a shop owner, if you truly want to be a part of that movement, you need to allow the people that are working in your shop to be a part of that as well. I never had a problem with it before I moved to the east, because I had keys and I could come in whenever, or they just knew me. They knew I just did stuff on my break. I never did anything on the clock, and
Mm.
it was just we knew it was good. We had an agreement of when I could make content, and I moved here, and I was told by a woman, to set this record straight, it was not a man, by a woman telling me that she did not want her company plastered all over my social media, and she did not want anything that is any part of her company to be on or around any part of my social media.
Mhm.
And that means like pictures of engines, like not even just pictures or content of me doing anything, because that I can kind of understand, right? Even though
Sure.
I am off the clock, you don't want customers assuming that you're wasting their time by filming a social media video on the clock on their money. I can get that. But she wouldn't allow anything. I mean, I couldn't take a picture of an engine if I like
Right.
just the engine. I wasn't allowed to do anything, even if it was removing decals and not telling anyone where I worked or a big, and so I was not allowed. That's not actually why I didn't pick that job to work
Mhm.
in. I picked a job that was closer to work at, but it's owners like that. Like if you truly want to be a part of the movement and you want to get the younger generation in the door, all these creators you see doing mechanic work and all this mechanic stuff you see on TikTok, someone allowed them to have the time to do that.
Yeah,
Um,
I think though, I think this is my opinion that a lot of the owners don't like the employees gaining that much popularity because then they feel like they've lost the power to them, and then they could lose them. Like I remember days like back in the dealership where I was at, we didn't allow technicians to have business cards. Like everyone was so afraid because technicians are in short supply that if techs had business cards, then they would be more accessible to either customers trying to hire them away or other, our competitive dealers to do so. And I've read like back in the early days of LinkedIn, companies, like a lot of companies, big ones, forbid their employees for having LinkedIn accounts. They didn't want all their competition to have access to their employees. I think that's a big part of it.
it could have been, she was kind of more of on the like, I got told because the man wanted to hire me. The
Mm.
foreman and the shop supervisor wanted to hire me. It was the actual owner of the company that
Mm.
was like, "Oh, if we hire you, by the way, you're not allowed to do any of your social media content at the shop."
Mm.
Um, he said that she's very old school,
Mm.
and that might be why,
Sure.
because some of my stuff on social media, occasionally I wear a crop top, not in the shop, but occasionally I wear a crop top. Like obviously when I'm in a shop, I'm dressed professionally, but she
Sure.
may not want any type of image like that associated with her company, which he didn't care. But
Hmm.
he said they are super old school, and sometimes people around here are super worried about their image. And if they think that you are going to add a negative image to their company, that might be why.
Hmm.
But he's like, I don't think it's fair because she's never told any of the men in the shop that they can't have a social media or they can't post on social media. That's not even a thing that's regulated. This was never even brought up until you put in an application here.
Yeah.
Um, so there's that. Some companies like Hanan, they thought it was great. And Four Rivers too. They're like, oh shit, it's like free advertisement.
Of course.
Go for it. Do whatever you want. As long as you're not on the clock, I don't care. Right? Don't
Sure.
shit talk the company, please. Right? That's really the only thing. But I can see the not wanting your mechanics to be high. But what are you going to do? Right? You can't force them to not go on field calls. You can't force them to not
Yeah,
interact
I
with
know.
any other customer.
Well, that's why it's always so short-sighted. The first thing that you mentioned, I completely agree with. I think most of the shortage is due to wages. I think technicians have been underpaid for a very long time for the skills and the service they provide. There's it's no secret that when equipment is down, downtime kills the customer. They are losing unbelievable amounts of money, loss of production, and unfortunately, wages haven't moved over the years to pay what the value that technicians were bringing to both the customers and the dealerships. And I think that's primarily the biggest reason. And that's like you mentioned too, like technicians are working in harsh environments, whether it be winter or summer in Florida and Texas. And to do that for, all day, every day for $30 an hour, $35 an hour, $40 an hour. And then to wonder why people aren't rushing into the field is pretty wild to me.
Yeah. I mean, when I left the industry, I was making 28 an hour and I thought that was decent, but that was also like 2 years ago. And I've been told by multiple companies just in the last couple of years, there's been a couple of John Deere dealerships that want to hire me. Um, and they're like, I can get you in the door above $30 an hour without anybody batting an eye. And I'm like, yeah, I'm just for a shop mechanic. Because when I started, those were like field
Hmm.
mechanic wages. But I do think that I don't think it's kept up with inflation as much as it should have. And the fact that, it's like a rare car, right? If cars are super rare and they're hard to find, they're worth a lot more than a Honda Civic you can find anywhere. And that's what technicians are. We're rare, we're hard to find. So it's going to cost you a lot more money. There's a lot of technicians out there that have completely quit working for other people because shop rates are $135 an hour. They
Hmm.
can go in and charge a customer $80 an hour. They're making a killing, and the customer feels like they're getting a deal.
Hmm.
So it's, I think the money's there. If you want to work for it, the money's there. I do think that they need a better uh, starting wage, and they need maybe some more money for the um, people that aren't working for themselves. They need to increase the wages of the mechanics that are working at dealerships, and they need to have a better like another thing that deters a lot of people, which is part of the reason actually why made the choice to leave was construction dealerships aren't as bad about this, but ag dealerships, 90% of them work Saturday every Saturday. So you're not only just giving 5 days a week of your entire life to a company
Hmm.
for 50, 55 hours a week, you're then required to work a Saturday. So you get one day off a week? That's
Yeah.
not really something that's
Yeah.
appealing to a lot of people. Like, yeah, when I was young and I was 18 when I first joined the industry, I'm like, yeah, give me 120-hour paychecks, 130-hour paychecks. Fuck yeah. And now it's like, man, I kind of want to go home and spend time with my family. Like,
But also for what the wage is, like it's just a reality. And most dealers will say like, hey, the cliches. Sales sells the first machine. Service sells the next, however many. It's like, well then, why? And I used to be an equipment salesperson. Like the salespeople make 5x what the technicians make, and that's wrong.
I also, yeah, I agree with that. And I mean, I do feel for companies sometimes because there's not that many technicians to start with. So sometimes they're dealt trash hands, bad mechanics, shit mechanics, and they can't fire them because they got to have somebody to do something.
Yeah.
There's no replacement for them. So, but I do think if you're a good mechanic and you try hard and you work hard and you show up on time, you leave on time, your wage should be better than what it is. Yeah. And I think a higher wage might also entice some of those that have kind of given up on trying very hard to work harder.
Totally.
It's just a total mess. It's a complete mess.
The conversation changes if you can show people a legitimate path to making I say $200K a year without college student loan debt, and doing a job that's this much in demand. Like the whole conversation changes. But to continue talking and kind of browbeating the younger generation, like, people are lazy, they don't want to do this work. Well, I wouldn't want to do it for what it's being paid. Like that doesn't make me lazy.
And it is like, if you can make $60,000 a year sitting at a desk or $60,000 a year busting your ass in a shop.
Yeah.
And that's what I've told people before. It's like, my workload with diesel laptops, because I was hired as a W-2 employee originally, and then we switched to 1099. My workload decreased substantially, and I still make what I made as a mechanic, doing social media and pushing, their product and using their product on my own engine builds and stuff like that. It's still less work that I had to put into my, obviously, like I don't know why I'm so attached to actually working as a mechanic. I'm just really attached to that, and I would not trade that for anything. But like, I can understand they wonder why people with 10 years of experience are leaving the industry, because they're getting offered jobs and things that pay very similar, that are not nearly as labor intensive.
Yeah, it's not that complicated.
But maybe that'll change.
I think it is. I think it is changing slowly, but yeah, because it's you keep reading. Construction spending continues to go up. More and more equipment is being sold. Like it's not slowing down. So the problem will only get worse. So the only way to do it is to people respond to incentives. Incentivize more people to go into the trade.
Well, and the automotive industry is even worse too with the incentive thing. Like. You worked on semis?
Some of our technicians do. Sure.
Yeah. So semis and equipment. So equipment mechanics in general get paid the best, and then semi mechanics are not very far behind. Automotive technicians are way fucking down compared to everyone else, and in my opinion, their shit's harder to work on.
Oh wow.
That's another thing is like. A lot of people judge this industry on the automotive industry and the wages. If you think the wages are bad in the diesel industry, you should take a look at the automotive industry, because it's worse.
Interesting.
It's bad. When I was working in Cheyenne, like you capped out as an automotive mechanic at like 25 an hour.
Oh wow.
And it's like now they're starting diesel mechanics at that. So, yeah, not to cut you off, but
no, interesting. Well, I appreciate you coming on and talking to us about kind of your journey. It's been pretty cool to follow, and we'd look forward to maybe continuing the conversation later on down the road.
Hey, sorry about I'm technologically challenged, so sorry about the little issues earlier. But.
You could do a 40-hour transmission job, but we always that's the funny thing about technology, though. It never works perfectly every time, and we're a tech company. So.
Yeah. Transmissions and engines are easy, but God forbid I got to set up a freaking podcast.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yep, thanks.